Hi. Now, which is the most difficult bird to photograph in the UK? And when I say difficult, I don't mean rare. I mean they're difficult because they're just hard to get good, clean shots of, but relatively common birds that are difficult to photograph. The bird I'm photographing today, once upon a time, would have been a contender for that bird, but not anymore. It's now become relatively easy to photograph. I'm talking about the bittern. I'm at the Lee Valley Country Park, just on the outskirts of London, and for several years, going back a few decades, this was the place to photograph bittern. In fact, it was the only place. There was a wooden hide here, typical birdwatcher's hide, apart from it was locked. So you had to have a key to get in it. Now, I had the key. I can't remember why I had the key. Presumably I had to become a member of something. It was quite a few years ago. But for maybe 2 or 3 years, this was the place to come to photograph bitterns. Then the reed bed extended and people said the bittern didn't really show anymore because it could go elsewhere. Instead of being a small reed bed, it became quite extensive. They've rebuilt the hide. It's now a very grand structure. And this last 2 winters, I would say, the bittern has been showing quite well. And the last few days, it's been showing exceptionally well. I know people that have been here and sat in the hide and the bird has gone very close and right out in the open. So I've come along this morning to have a look. Now, which bird would I actually regard as the most difficult to photograph? Well, I think 2 contenders, jack snipe and Cettis warbler. Cettis warbler, you know it's there, it's very noisy, you can't mistake the call, it's very distinguished. But to actually see one is difficult enough. To get one and focus on it, and even to get it singing, is even more difficult.
When I finally got this bird out into the open, I'm saying, sing, go on, sing for me, please sing. This was the very first stills picture I ever took of a Cettis warbler, and it took many hours to get. This is the only place I've ever found where Cettis warblers are easy to photograph. It's the SL Favera Nature Reserve on Majorca. I might not be saying that right, but it's like a tunnel through the woods, and both nightingale and Cettis warbler sing out in the open and are extremely showy.
Jack snipe, well, you don't know they're there. They're actually quite common, I think, jack snipe. You've just got to almost stand on them before you know they're there, and then they fly away.
These were taken at Marsh Lane Nature Reserve in the West Midlands. Very noticeable, the conditions were very cold, and a lot of pictures you see of jack snipe when they come out in the open, it's in frosty, snowy conditions. But it certainly is a very difficult bird to photograph. I've thought of another 2 contenders too. This is lesser whitethroat. I've always found these very difficult to photograph. Very common, but they just do not show themselves readily. But for me, the most difficult British bird to photograph is the European or common quail. I've still not managed to photograph one digitally, so this is a slide scan from a very old Kodachrome slide. Back at the Lee Valley Country Park, if you arrive early enough you might have the hide to yourself, but later on it fills up and every window can be occupied. And there's no doubt about it, some windows offer a better angle of view than others. The windows are very large with a very open aspect, very common in modern hides. You don't feel like you're hiding away from the birds at all. And it can be very noisy in there because it echoes too. There's a notice board on the side telling you what birds have been seen, including the bittern, but you can have some long waits.
You've got to keep looking because these birds are incredibly well camouflaged. and it could well be it's now stepped out slightly in the open and I should be able to see it, so I'm having to stare all the time.
Only once all the other photographers have arrived can you start to relax a little bit, because there's other pairs of eyes looking out for it. Somebody's going to spot it. But they can be very difficult to see. This is a very typical fishing procedure for a bittern. They don't move very much, but the bill is often in the water, unlike a heron. I don't think that's a fish. And when the bird does come out into the open, it's noticeable it tends to keep moving. It's more comfortable when it's amongst the reeds.
The bird is making its way along the edge of the reed, and then it's got a choice. It can either carry on or it can turn right and come across that, what I think is a log.
This is where I want it to turn right, but no, it doesn't. It goes past the log and up one of the channels. So this is the very typical pose they take up when they're fishing. The head goes down low amongst the reeds. I've run that sequence through one frame at a time and it didn't catch anything. As well as holding the bill under the water, notice how it turns its head on the side as well, presumably looking down with one eye. It's coming to that log, but from the other side now, and I would like it to go across that log. Then I might get a totally clear shot of a bittern. What you don't want at this site is the sun to shine, because it's a very strong backlighting. You want cloudy overcast. And you've got to be prepared to put the time in too. There was one photographer there who told me out of the last 2 weeks he spent 11 days in this hide photographing the bittern. At last he's caught a fish. And now it's caught a bigger fish. But watch that bit of vegetation as well. What's he going to do about that? I've seen many a bird who wipes its bill when it gets messy, either on the floor or a suitable branch. This bird stayed like this for several minutes. I've had to cut some of it out, else it would take too long. But eventually, watch its foot. As its head goes down, its foot comes forwards. Did it do that deliberately? Did it grab that bit of vegetation and pull it? Or was it an accident? I think it was an accident. Thanks for watching.